Hi, and welcome to AXSChat. Delighted to have Becki Morris with us today. Becki is a regular on our weekly chats, but this week you're the guest. So delighted to have you with us, Becki. You do a bunch of work for at Museums DCM, which is the Disability Co-operative Network for Museums, which is really of great interest to me because I love looking at museums. And you're also involved with the Dyslexia Adult Network, which is also of interest to me as an adult dyslexic, and you do some work with the local organisations for the British Dyslexia Association. So all home turf for me, areas that are greatly familiar but of great interest too. So can you tell us a bit about yourself, how you came to get involved in this stuff, and a bit about all of these three overlapping interesting things that you do?
Well, thank you very much for that introduction. I tell you what it is. I've been a museum curator for about 18 years now, and one of the things that I did was in 2011, I decided to have a career break and leave the sector, the museum sector, and I studied and trained to be a dyslexia screener. And what I did was I specialised in helping adults who have literacy difficulties, but also those families that find it's difficult for them to access testing, educational psychologist reports. So what I did was I set that up, and I work with now 2 local charities. Then what happened was I went back into the sector in 2012, and one of the things that I did was I noticed that museums were relying very heavily on labels, and that some of the things that I was learning when I was training actually were starting to come back in. So things like using serif fonts like Times New Roman. So my training as an adult screener then developed into the D.A.N network, and then I realised that literally the museum sector itself needed almost like a consortium of opportunity to raise the awareness about access issues when people visit museums, but also the way information is presented, and then the idea about disability in the workplace. And that's when I spoke to my colleague over a coffee, as you do, and literally came up with the idea of the Disability Co-operative Network, the idea that about talking to each other to help raise awareness of disability, but also more importantly, how disability is represented within history, with our museum collections, but also more importantly, how that information is presented. So not like loads of text. But another thing as well was when it came to museums, there wasn't a network that looked at museum disability awareness as a kind of cohesion. None of that was there. There's been various other networks happening, but this is one purely for people with disabilities because it is seen that that is something that museums need to do more of. So that's how we came up with it. And the steering committee was formed via Twitter. Literally, we ended up all meeting up in an Italian cafe in the middle of London and realised that we all had exactly the same in common. And that's how we ended up literally launching the network on the 15th of September. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I love stories when Twitter brings people together.
Yes.
It's a great tool. It's proved fantastic for us here at AXSChat. When I say here, I mean virtually here. Obviously, we're widely dispersed.
Yeah.
But I know what you mean about museums being very textual. However, some of the greatest joy that I've had has been in some of the sort of things like visiting the Science Museum, where you can get really hands-on, and there's all sorts of, and also actually the kids exhibits, the children's exhibits tend to be less textual. So I'm okay with reading. It's the writing that's my problem. But I agree, the fonts are usually pretty bad. The tiny little sizes. Usually it's fairly darkly lit because especially if you're in galleries or the great old houses where the curtains are drawn so that the sunlight doesn't fade the tapestries anymore, so you can't see the stuff very well. So I totally get some of the challenges. So what are some of the things that you're doing to address some of the simple challenges like legibility and conveying the information?
Ah, right. One of the things that we're doing is, first of all, celebrating the low light. So the idea is that if you're sensory sensitive to light, going to a museum is going to support you with that difficulty or that trait. So it's about sometimes celebrating that kind of element of museums and also raising awareness that that can be a good thing. Also looking at things about how information is presented, so things like creating graphic strips like that to tell a complicated story, so you're not having to rely on oodles of text. Also looking at the process of consultation, so having it at pre-planning your project, during and after, and that is about consultation and identifying crossover traits. So something that's useful for somebody with dyspraxia could be useful for somebody with dementia. So it ends up becoming more inclusive in that way. So you're not siloing people off. This is for that person, this is for this person, and things like that. And therefore creates a more equal experience as such, if there's such a word. Another thing as well is also looking at how technology can be useful. So the idea about creating things like podcasts, also tablet technology in respect to background colours, also being able to identify different learning styles so people can engage in different ways, not just reading and trying to sort of decipher what's going on. And it's so sort of, in the end, it's beautiful because that's what it's all about. Museums are for everybody, and that's sometimes where we need to go, is to demonstrate that as well, because we all believe it. It's a case of sometimes it doesn't seem that way.
Okay. Deborah, I know you have a question.
Yes, Becki, I was fascinated with what you said. I'm sorry, I might be breaking up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Antonio, you go.
Antonio, do you want to get in while Deborah sorts her microphone out?
No, what happens for a couple of seconds? I have you all frozen on the screen. That was why. I don't know if you have the same experience than I did.
Yeah. No, it was working fine.
Okay, perfect. So, no, a museum is a space where you have people from different countries. Also it's a melting pot, of cultures. And what do you think it will? What is the recipe to create an inclusive experience that assures that people are able to take the most of what they are able to learn when they are spending the time having that experience inside the museum?
Oh, so it's like the idea about creating an inclusive museum for people from all different cultures. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm really keen on is how museums can develop their audiences and how they reflect their communities. And one of the things that you do with that is by inviting the community in to the museum, but also in regards to creating projects where you can enhance your collections by being able to create things like sort of see if there's any opportunities for people to donate objects or sort of talk and record their stories. So that's one way of doing it. Another way is to respect that some people may have difficulties in respect to the English language. So again, that's how that looks. That's how it can be for people with different learning styles. So being able to offer that in different ways can be incredibly inclusive as well.
Okay, I'm going to try again.
Sounds good.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Becki, something that you said really made me think a little bit about the path that I've taken, but that you actually walked away from the museums for a while and, you know, focused on different work, and then you were able to come back and tie them together, and you seem very happy with the way you took your almost your old life and your new life and blended them together for greater social good. So I can't. We already knew that we loved you because you do such great comments on AXSChat, but that really speaks to some of the work that I've done. So, how can others, you know, follow your path and bring your two worlds together for the greater good?
Well, one of the things that we're looking for in particular with Museum D.C.N, this is the thing of what we're all about. We're a cooperative network, and the idea is that we don't see ourselves as exclusively museums. We want to talk to people from different charities as well that don't get a high enough profile. So we want to talk to those. We also want to talk to people who have had negative experiences because we want to learn from them. We want to sort of create this en masse network of information, like two-way traffic, to be able to really sort of influence not just museums but other public spaces. So things like the National Health Service or doctors' offices like GPs information, things like that, because museums are about sharing information in public spaces. We're not the only places that do that, and it's about sharing that and influencing museums' messages, but also being able to use our skills in different sectors as well.
So Becki, I know that you're focusing your attention in the UK, in England. You know, has the consortium reached out to other parts of the world? I know we've made some efforts here in the United States, but I think we could do a lot more. But how about looking at it from a global perspective? Are y'all doing that?
Yes, we want to, and literally thank you as well, because you provided one of our first case studies literally just as we were launching, and also we've spoken to Portugal as well in respect to the museums there, also Indianapolis as well, but we want more people. That's the thing, is that we've already got people like Scope following us on Twitter. We want to roll that out, so we were able to create like this almost this en masse network, so to speak, of traffic. So yeah, literally the US, particularly, no hint, Smithsonian.
Yeah, I agree. And they've made some efforts. It would be nice to see y'all come together, because you know, learn from it. Everybody learn from each other.
This is it. We've had so much interest, and also we've had so much in respect to we've had very little challenge in all this. So we know we're doing the right thing and also going on the right track. So literally, it is a case of, it's not just us, come aboard, literally. We want to hear from people, and we want to be able to sort of share their expertise and share ours as well. So yeah, particularly as well, just to add, we are creating a blog for disabled people to offer their comments on the website as well about their experiences. So yes, that's coming soon.
Cool.
So when you are talking with people and they explaining your project and what you do, how often you find people that relate with it and say, oh, maybe there's something here that I never thought about it, and maybe this will help me as well, because it's not actually something that I put much of thought myself on it.
Yeah, it's the idea sometimes with a lot of people, they've said to us things like, good gracious, we need this. And also some people have come forward and sort of said, I need to be able to talk to my boss about this. So that's where my dyslexia training comes in, very useful. Also, there are people who will literally say to us, I need to find out, I need to talk to this particular group of people, how can I do that? in respect to the project, because I'm not quite sure if we can afford this particular piece of technology. And I'll say to them, go to the website and talk to X museum, or talk to them about this, because there were some reports done recently where they said the museum sector lacked confidence in working and talking to disabled groups, and one of those things is to raise that confidence as well. And that was something that was reported widely, particularly as well with communities having to deal with things like disability, hate crime. It was about being able to sort of show museums as an important tool in respect to reducing disability hate crime as well.
Interesting. So I'm very interested to understand. Obviously, you've taken the dyslexia angle and you've applied a wider disability focus to museums. And it's not all about physical access. This is more about the access to information. A while back, we talked with a guy called Gavin Neat, and he's been doing some amazing stuff with technology in Edinburgh.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know whether you're in touch with Gavin or you know Gavin, but he's well worth talking to in terms of they're using stuff to send stuff to people's individual mobile phones, because one of the areas that you may struggle with is not everyone's going to be able to afford a whole fleet of tablets.
Yes.
Smaller museums, but it might be possible to put in place some relatively inexpensive beacons, and then people can use their own phones via Bluetooth or whatever. And again, you can have the information given to you in the format that you want, rather than the format that's just presented to you. So you have great flexibility.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And another thing as well is that with technology, for some museums, they need to know where the technology is in respect to development. So things like QR codes, and also being using particular apps, knowing that there is some shelf life with them. So one of the things that we want to do that's actually been inspired by AXSChat, true story guys, like that, is like a technical corner as such. So the idea is that if people have got an app, some way like Gavin's work, to be able to actually highlight that, to showcase it to the museum community, so we can try it in our different museums as well, and people being able to sort of write it up, evaluate it, things like that, because sometimes it's difficult to find out exactly where you are in respect to the technology. So is it museums don't have very much money. A lot of museums are having a lot of difficulties with funding at the moment. So sometimes it's about finding out if something has got a shelf life of, say, 2 to 3 to 4 years, or if it's adaptable in that respect. And that's what we really, really want to know. So if anybody has got any projects that they're interested in, want to showcase, they're more than happy to drop me a line. I'd love to hear from them. You know.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Tanya, you have another question?
No, that was still no, but no, but I can move on anyway. So, considering all the some of the issues that you mentioned in relation to technology, and the fact that it needs to be something that works for a period of time, have you ever thought on having sponsors or companies who actually become those who support the museums with that part of technology as the enables and somehow to create the museums more accessible? Because in fact it's something that will look good for any company to be part of that.
I tell you, it's a really good question, because sometimes it depends on the funding body of the museum. But if anybody wants to talk about sponsorship, if they want to drop me a line, I'm more than happy to have a conversation with them. That would be absolutely fantastic. So yeah, I'd certainly be happy to have a chat with them.
Interesting. So As a crossover, and going back to some of the other stuff you're doing with Dyslexia Adult Network, because this is a particular interest to me, can you explain a little bit more about what the Dyslexia Adult Network is? I know it's a collection of the various big dyslexia charities, and I think it's important that we do focus beyond education. So I welcome any moves into the adult space, because I think adult dyslexia is way past time that it got a voice. But can you tell us a bit more about how the network functions and what it does and what the remit is?
Yeah, I've got dyspraxia. I'm dyspraxia dyslexic. So when it comes to adults with dyslexia, that is something I'm particularly interested in, because with D.A.N, it's first of all ensuring that adults with dyslexia get the right kind of information. So one of the things we're particularly keen to hear about at the moment is the situation with access to work. So we're looking for case studies in respect to people's positive and negative experience of access to work. So we can actually talk to the various government bodies like DWP and speak to them about what we can do in respect to ensuring that adults get the right kind of support if they need it, and also the right kind of information as well, because sometimes it's difficult to get the right kind of information to those adults. So literally that's what we want to do with access to work, is to try and find out a little bit more about what's going on. So when you make that phone call, you get the right kind of information and the right kind of support. Other thing is as well is ensuring that adults get the right kind of what the key issues are within the workplace. So ensuring about raising positive messages to employers that, you know, we've been recruited by MI6, you know, ensuring about the positivity of employing dyslexic people, but also in regards to ensuring that there are no difficulties within that experience as well. So the idea about recruitment, being able to talk to people about their dyslexia in a confident way, and also making sure that dyslexic adults also know what they can and the best way of saying it, if you know what I mean.
Okay, so I'm definitely for coming out and being open about dyslexia, as anyone that follows AXSChat will know. I think that one of the areas that's a real pain point is as people's career paths change. So you can have good provision, and this is particularly prevalent amongst people with dyslexia, where they start off in fairly and doing quite well in jobs, and then they get put into a management position, and the type of work changes dramatically, which triggers off all kinds of real difficulties. You know, there's loads more paperwork, there's all kinds of organizational stuff. So whereas before you might have been relying on skills that you'd learned and everything else, you're having to learn these again. And I think that there's a real lack of provision or understanding of how to provide for people as they make that transition, and often what starts out as something really positive ends up being something really quite painful and negative, because people then begin to fail. Yeah. So we're not there yet with the support to enable people to perform. And I count myself as guilty as having changed job role and not updated any kind of access to work. I could do with some admin help, and that's actually and that's an area where I think Dyslexia Adult Network could help. Yeah. Because I believe that the technology isn't everything.
No.
Actually, the removal of some of the non-medical help type stuff is deleterious to people that have made that transition into the more complex managerial type roles. Whereas before, you know, you could do your work and you had assistive tech and it helped you, when you start having to juggle lots of balls all at once, that's actually when you need someone to lean on. And what generally happens is people lean on colleagues.
Yes.
They can't always rely on that. And we're now working in an environment where actually I work remotely. So I can't turn to, well, I can turn to my dog, turn to Bonbon and ask him, but he's not much help. So I think it's quite a serious issue that needs addressing somehow. And I believe that there needs to be some kind of effective lobby group. And my only concern is that there's not enough money in dyslexia. The dyslexia charities have about £3 per person with dyslexia per annum in terms of income. Whereas if you look at charities that relate to blindness or deafness, they've got hundreds of pounds per person in relation, or maybe thousands even. So that's a real issue for us. How do we, how do you think we can address some of that? Because I think that the dyslexia charities are woefully underfunded, and that means that we're going to have to punch above our weight, perhaps.
I think there's a number of things there. I think one of them is that we've got to have some statistics behind us in respect to the level of cost in respect to what's happening, because you're absolutely right. The key thing is that once you get to a management level position, sometimes as well it's about developing those strategies and giving them time to bed in, but also more importantly, sometimes for a lot of adults they come to you once there is an issue. So, and usually it's like the relationship between the manager, etc., starts to break down. And what happens is that with that, it's about ensuring that they get support in that respect as well. Because sometimes it's that horrible scenario that everything has gone wrong, and then that person is expected to work within that environment again, but as in the same job. Another thing as well is that with dyslexia, you're absolutely right, there's not enough money at all. So sometimes it's a bit like the D.A.N, it's about creating that network of people and being able to create those and identify those difficulties in terms of social exclusion and being able to facilitate the right kind of support for people, but also when they get into the workplace, ensuring that they have that right kind of information. So if they go up to management level, which they should do, because they're all talented when it comes down to it, been in the business 4 years, they're all talented, it's ensuring that information is there so they can get help. But most importantly, sometimes, particularly for people in the building trade and things like that, there isn't enough computer classes, adult literacy classes and things like that, and there isn't enough of that about. So it's ensuring that is also put into place as well for people who have been failed by the education system. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I completely agree with you.
Becki, I have a quick question. One thing that we're seeing with all the new technology, the wearables, the Internet of Things, the robotics, all the really cool things we're seeing, including, smart cities and smart houses. It seems to me that a lot of that could be applied to the work that you're doing with accessible museums. And I know you've already been talking about some of it, but and also as I listen to you and Neil talk about the dyslexia and the funding issues and things like that, it seems to me a lot of this stuff all ties together. It's always got to, I think technology can never replace, good, solid person-to-person, training and things that we need to do. But I was just curious, how are some of these new technologies blending into the work that you're doing with making sure that museums are accessible?
One of the things that we're particularly looking at is the opportunities of using smartphones in respect to getting to and from the museum. Also, to be honest, it's in different levels. It's like you've got the new technologies, but also we're looking at the more day-to-day style decent signage so you don't get lost. Also ensuring that you've got a paper-based copy for something to refer to. Then you've got your new technology in respect to finding your way to the place, like Google Maps, because I get lost so easily, and sometimes for a lot of people they have to have some kind of steer into respect to where they're going. So just something that you can print off and use that way, or a PDF that can talk to you back, things like that. But also in regards to new technologies, about creating things like open source software, things like Audacity to create your podcast. So more and more museums can use it. So your voluntary run museum can use the open source software, and it's of a decent quality, right up to your big national. So being able to create it at different tiers as well to keep that process going as well. I hope that makes sense.
No, that was excellent. That was excellent. And I recently started a podcast, and I'm using Audacity. I love that tool. Amazing tool.
Brilliant. This is it. And if anybody can use it, more people are likely to have that as their key offer as well. Yeah, exactly.
I'm with you on directions. I'm absolutely useless. I do wonder sometimes. Obviously, you can provide the links in Google Maps, but I also think that one of the things that we do as dyslexics, I'm broadly generalising now, so I'll get flamed later, is navigate by landmarks.
Yes.
So once I know a route, I will go from point to point to point to point. I'll get there. It might not be the shortest route.
Yes.
So I just wonder if sometimes it might actually be helpful if we're talking about how to get to places, is to actually put pictures of some of these landmarks that are recognizable in our literature, so that people can actually go, oh, that's that, you know, and find their way there. Because I'm totally with you. Even with modern tools, I can still get lost.
Me too.
I can still get lost inside buildings, let alone outside.
Yes. I tell you what as well, it's a two-way thing again, because if you used local businesses, so turn left when you see X business like that, so in the end you're giving them advertising.
Yes.
So it's creating that kind of, you know, experience as well, and that's when the disability isn't the kind of reason why it was created anymore. It was, but then it starts to sort of become a more, like smartphones with diaries on them, you know, 10, 15 years ago, it was, oh, this is the new tool. Everybody uses them now. So that's where we're particularly keen on going to. So the idea is that you can create something and it has a shop front or a particular thing attached to it. Everybody uses it. It's not just for a particular group of people. Yes, I got lost on the way to McDonald's once. In a town in Nuneaton. I'd lived here for 5 years and I got lost. Literally, it was a long day. Yeah, true story.
That doesn't surprise me.
Oh God, it's a nightmare sometimes. Yeah.
So the last thing that we mentioned before we run out of time was that you also coordinate the local groups for the British Dyslexia Association. So I know a little bit about how the BDA is structured, but most of our viewers won't. So can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I'll tell you what it is that I'm the adult representative for the local association board by the British Dyslexia Association. And what it is that the local associations feed into this board meeting, and then I take that information and I feed it to D.A.N. So we create almost like a two-way traffic scenario. So any particular issues, any particular difficulties are raised and then taken forward to D.A.N. like that.
Okay.
And that's what we do.
So my understanding of how the BDA is structured is you've got a national network, but you've got lots of little local networks as well, and they've got their own different cultures.
Yes.
Um, so, so I guess you've got different issues arising in different areas, but there's got to be some commonality.
Yes, and it's about seeking that commonality. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and also, sorry, and also some, it's like with North Warwickshire and Coventry Dyslexia Association, our demographic is very similar to Tamworth's. So what we did was we created a partnership to have an adult support group, and not only have they assisted my museum's access panel for people visiting museums with dyslexia, but also they've supported D.A.N as well.
Okay.
So that's how I like to do things. Yeah.
Excellent. I'm a great believer in bringing stuff together because the disability world's very fragmented.
Yes.
And there's a limited pot of money, as we all know, and the greater the fragmentation, the less likely we are to succeed. So I think we're at the end of our time, so I'm going to have to close now, but thank you very much, Becki. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and look forward to joining you on Twitter tomorrow night.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for asking me. It's been a real pleasure.
You were amazing, Becki. We knew you would be.
Thank you.